Welcome back to the Injury Report on ESPN 760. Steve Politziner with my co-host, Dr. Jonathan Cutler, South Florida Foot and Ankle Centers. Having a great conversation today about the upper extremities, which we want to get a little bit more into right now, Doc, with Dr. Jeffrey Rosenfield, our guest today.
Yeah, we've had a great conversation so far, and I'll tell you, I'm really interested in looking at the shoulder. When I had my shoulder surgery, it was a long rehab. It was tough. In fact, it was much more complicated. I was in there for 3 to 4 hours when it was supposed to be an hour surgery. So obviously I did a lot of damage in there. You know, you do a lot of shoulder surgery as well. Is there anything that you use that has, made it easier for you over the years to accomplish a more successful surgery?
Sure. Well, we perfected the arthroscopic technique over the last decade or two, but with that required specialized instrumentation that we can do the surgery through keyhole surgery. Arthroscopic surgery is, minimally invasive surgery of the shoulder, and it's faster rehab. The long-term results are just as good as the old-fashioned open techniques where you make a big incision and cut through the deltoid muscle to get down to the damage. So arthroscopic technique has been perfected the last decade or two. Fortunately, I had a lot of extensive training on it. I use it a lot in my practice. Companies like Smith & Nephew are out there. They make great bone anchors. They make probes and shavers that help clean up the tissue, prepare the bed, and then use their equipment effectively to be able to bring the tendon back to the bone for repair. Of course, yours may have been an extensive one that required additional efforts, and the rehab is critical as well. So you can't ignore the post-operative period, but the intraoperative period as a surgeon, these companies are out there that have made a tremendous acceleration of technique that has allowed us to be minimally invasive and give patients great results.
I'm already thinking you must have not been enamored with the surgeon because you have a radio show and you're bringing a different surgeon on today.
Well, I mean, that's not necessarily true. But I didn't do too well in surgery. I'm really probably not the best patient, Steve. I mean, I went in there and I was supposed to be out for 3 months. 3 days later, I was back doing surgery. And the rehab for this... You
were doing surgeries as a doctor.
Yeah, I couldn't sit still. That was just me. But the rehab for a shoulder surgery, I literally was... I mean, I used to think I was tough. Believe me, I am not. I would be crying like a baby when someone was taking my arm.
Well, Dr. Rosenfield, then we also want to make sure we focus on prevention because I think we're all are scared about what does that mean, just the mobility on a day-to-day basis, much less the ability to get back and play sports. And, well, let's start it really on a basic level for the weekend warrior, for the average layman. We hear the word rotator cuff surgery, and you hear about these athletes who have these major injuries. Tell us about it and bring it all the way down to a local level.
Sure. Well, we talked about triceps and biceps ruptures. The rotator cuff is just another set of tendons that connect muscle to bone, and they can get torn sometimes. But many times it's a inflammation or a tendinitis that precedes the rupture or the tear. So a lot of times shoulder pain can be that sort of simmering, and if it's left unchecked, it can lead to a tear or a rupture. So you can have a series of events that it's like a cascade where it's just a little bit of pain and some inflammation, and left unchecked, it gets worse and worse, and then eventually the tendon can rupture. So you want to kind of catch it early, treat it aggressively, and try to prevent the rupture.
I mean, John, you had your shoulder, so you're probably the best example. Was there one time where you got a feeling where you were like, oh, this is worse than I just injured, that I just have a little tweak here? Was there an indicator for you?
Yeah, well, I'm not the brightest guy. You know that, Steve. And I would have the pain, and I'd play through the pain. And then at nighttime when I go to bed, I could not sleep. And after 18 months of not sleeping and playing basketball and people knowing that my left side was weaker than my right, then I knew I had to get something done.
So he is an example of someone who should have seen you probably a year earlier.
Playing through the pain is classic. I'll tell you, the golfers out there and the tennis players, you tell them to slow down or shut it down. We talk about Strasburg and shutting them down after a certain amount of time to try to protect the repair. But even before that, when you sense something's wrong and shutting it down, for my golfers, that goes. Their theory is, well, I won't play 36 today. I'll just play 18, but I'm still going to play 6 days a week. Or my tennis players, they're not going to play their 5 sets that weekend. They're only going to play 3. And that doesn't quite cut it. That's not shutting it down.
But can shutting it down for an extended period of time, along with whatever rehab you prescribe,
absolutely
avoid the surgeries?
I knew that question was coming. The body's a remarkable thing. We can a lot of times take care of ourselves by just being sensible and doing the right thing. Sometimes you can't, and then things happen, and they rupture or tear, and they need our help as physicians. But if you get a sense that something's not quite right, you don't play through the pain. That's not advisable. Go seek medical evaluation, and there are certain things we can do to try to help make a diagnosis and treat before the bad stuff happens.
Then you go over to the athletes that really have these injuries, and so often it's accompanied with pictures. Explain exactly what happens and why those guys get shut down too.
Right.
But oftentimes that's not enough.
Well, first of all, they're commodities, and so there's a financial interest at stake when they have an injury. So they want to make sure that they come back, as good, if not better, when the injury first presents itself. But a lot of times it's an anatomical thing, the way they're throwing, a mechanical thing. Sometimes there are certain changes in their anatomy that might precede the injury itself. But these athletes, they have the highest tech equipment. They have a full-time complement of support staff, therapists, trainers, doctors who are on site. And so those athletes, if you're talking about the high-level athlete, shutting them down is obviously financially important for a lot of people involved, including the athlete, so you don't want to play through the pain in that case. But there's rehab protocols. There's all kinds of physical therapy. There's the newest science that's out there we didn't really talk about yet with stem cells and PRP that's out there. Famous names that are in the paper, like Bertolo Colon went down, had some PRP injections done locally, I think, and then rehabbed it and came back, as good, if not stronger. So there are some things that we can do as physicians that can prevent the problem from happening so they don't need the surgery in the future.
So, let's bring it down to another level. Let's bring it back where we started this off with kids. I mean, Steve, you have a young kid who's going to be playing soon, and I have a kid who plays, and that's always the dilemma. I hear these things, and when we grew up as kids, I would pitch every 3 days, and I really wasn't that good, but I would still pitch every 3 days. So today's kid, it's once a week.
And in fact, many of the youth leagues have the limitations. You can only pitch this kid X innings. It's usually innings limitations versus the pitch counts that they have now. Are we right on? Would you like to see more of that?
I would. I've seen, there's such an emphasis now. There's such a competitive philosophy or culture now. These kids, they're being pushed at a young age. They're doing way more than we ever did. They're more than just a recreational athlete at that age now. So it is pitch count limits. It's the type of pitches that they're throwing, or a football quarterback, how many throws that they should be making. There is some good science now that has helped to sort of forge these parameters that are there to try to prevent the injury, protect the children while they're still growing. And when they're adults, they can make their own decisions. But we do have a little bit of a responsibility to make sure that they don't do too much too quick.
Jeff, on that note, you have little Johnny who comes in your office at 10 years old with his dad, and he's throwing his 70 pitch count. I think there is a pitch count in some of these little leagues now where he does throw that 70 pitch count. What do you tell little Johnny's dad about what he should do between the 6 games that he pitches? How much is he allowed to throw on the day that he's actually not throwing? Because I see some of these kids, they go to center field and they don't pitch, but they throw from center field to home at least 40 times, which I got to imagine is just as strenuous, if not more.
Absolutely. And even in the professional level, Major League Baseball, you get these pitchers that they are now doing the pitch count on the sports during the World Series. They're showing how many pitches they're throwing. They didn't count the warm-ups. They didn't count the 3 days before that. There are still tremendous forces with those exercises even before game situation. And it goes all the way down to our kids and our little leaguers. They need to account for those pitches. And there is a push now to make sure that they fall within a certain range, that they're not overdoing it, that the children, they're not sneaking out and throwing with their friends or against the backstop more than they're supposed to. And there is a bit of a responsibility on the parent side and the physician side, the coach's side, to make sure they're not pushed too hard, too fast, and that they are a controlled growth. I think that's real important.
Yeah, kind of a natural segue here. You were talking about pitchers and pitching every 3 days, 4 days. Of course, you have your traditional 5-man rotations, 4 days rest. In the playoffs, sometimes you go down to 3 days rest, and there's so much debate on what does that do for a pitcher, and if you're a sinker baller, is it better for you because your arm's already tired? You even saw some teams go the other way and go to 6-man rotations this year, late in the year, who have a lot of younger players that want to preserve those arms for long term. You mentioned Steven Strasburg, one of the hottest debates in sports talk this year. When a guy is basically about to win the Cy Young Award, you shut him down for a team that was had the best record in the league at the time, and the Nationals end up not going on and getting out of the first round of the playoffs. But there's so much debate there when you get into that Tommy John surgery on the time to bring them back. Do you agree with the move that the Nationals made? They had a plan at the beginning of the year. They had a certain amount of innings, and when he hit those innings, they were going to shut him down regardless. You got to give them credit for sticking to their plan. I'm not sure if it was the smartest baseball decision.
I agree. It's a subject of great debate. It will never be resolved. The number of people that we can count that are on World Series contenders that pitch at that level is on one hand. So our experience is limited. So it's best guess scenario based on all of their history. Tommy John surgery was not done 25 years ago, and it wasn't done with the frequency that it has been in the last 5 to 10 years. So we don't have a lot of long-term studies to show what they're going to be like at the end of their career versus now. I think it was obviously a group effort. They had the doctors on board, the therapists on board, the owner on board, the general manager and the player himself. And Strasburg didn't really say much about it. I don't think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but he may have had some influence on the decision as well. He's got a big contract. He's young in his career. He's probably thinking long term. So I think it was smart that they had a plan at the beginning of the season. They stuck to it. I admire them for that. They didn't let the fact that they haven't made the playoffs ever in their Washington history, going back to their predecessors, of course. But I admire them for sticking to the plan. I would say, though, that it could have been probably fine-tuned a little bit based on the situation because, again, there's not a lot of strong science to back up what they did. It was just best-guess scenario, and would 10 or 12 more innings made a difference, and that 1 or 2 games that he could have pitched could have made a big difference in their success and ultimately their revenue. So I agree with the decision, but I think it could have been tweaked.
Do you guys foresee a day especially with kids, they get scoliosis tests. Where when you're going into playing athletes before Little League or before high school baseball, because of the rampant injuries that have gone now and the amount of practice and throwing the kids are doing, where they will have to undergo tests where to that level where there'll be some form of X-rays or MRIs to make sure that their shoulders, their elbows, kids, and it goes all the way up to athletes, they don't want to say when they're injured. They don't want to miss time. They don't want to let down their team. But especially at the youth level, guys, they could be risking their long-term health and their future for most of them who are not going to go and get that big payday and play at the professional level.
I mean, I don't know what Dr. Rosenfield's opinion is, but as far as I see, I don't think there's any testing right now. And as Dr. Rosenfield said, this is a very new science. I mean, we really don't know. We don't really know how many innings he should pitch, or how many pitches he can pitch when he's not on the mound during the game. How many times can he throw from short to first? How many times? It's a very inexact science, and I don't think that day will ever come where something was specific like that.
Where
they're now doing concussion testing
more
before the year starts.
Right. There are neurological tests that you can do that are fixed parameters, some memory and cognition that are I think pretty well documented, especially after the head injury. But to prevent you can't prevent a head injury. So to get a test before the season starts to say, are you at risk for getting a concussion, I think it's probably not possible because how relevant is it? If you don't get the head injury, you may not ever have a concussion. Same thing with an elbow or shoulder. If you never have the injury, you don't know. So to be able to have a scientific way of screening for that patient to say, well, are they going to be at risk for an injury or not? Some of it doesn't matter with anatomical variation, carrying angles of the elbow, ranges of motion. If they, some of these guys are just freaks in nature, and genetically they're just programmed to be superstars in their sport. But for the average athlete, I doubt that there's going to be a day where you can do an MRI or an X-ray and say you're going to be a better baseball pitcher than a golfer. And plus, with this I don't mean to bring healthcare into this in the current debate with the election just upon us, that the healthcare dollar has to be wisely spent, and to go out and spend a $500 for a $500 test to make that determination, which is probably inexact anyway. I agree with Dr. Cutler. It's probably distant future that we're going to be able to screen these kids for those injuries or what sport they should play.
Let me go, as long as we're on this subject, as far as prevention. We have little Johnny out there, and some of the, exercises that he can do to prevent some of these arms or shoulder injuries. I know, just on the side, that, today you talked about the test, Steve. What can be done, and will we do that? Probably the answer is more in the equipment. I just looked at my kid's football helmet, and this football helmet today is unbelievable. It's like going to a space shuttle. It's so protected. In my day, it was like, it wasn't the leather helmet. It wasn't leather. It wasn't there, but it wasn't that far from it. But what are some of the things today that we can tell our kids, or even our high school kids,
or even John, to avoid the other shoulder?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good warm up. Obviously, get the blood flowing. Simple things like
why? What does that mean?
Well, to help prevent injury. If you have good blood flow to an area that's injured, you're going to get. It's kind of the PRP philosophy. This platelet-rich plasma that's sort of the big bandwagon now. You have growth factors and proteins that are in the blood, and if you get good blood flow to an area, it can help repair damaged tissue. And just muscle forces and a warmed up muscle is less likely to be injured than a cold muscle that goes hard and heavy. So a good warm up is important. Good blood flow, making sure your joints are flexible. So good stretching technique. A light warm up first, and then stretching is usually recommended. I think 5 to 10 minutes of a light warm up before you stretch, just to get the blood flowing and the joints supple. And then moderation, weightlifting. Everybody should lift some weights. You don't have to bench 400 pounds because you can. It's probably smarter to do lighter weight and more frequent reps.
Interesting you say that. I see a former professional Major League Baseball pitcher where at a gym that I go to, and he does every day. I assume, as I see him there almost every day, a set of rotator cuff exercises with very, very light weight. Right. I'm talking 5 pounds max, maybe 2.5 pounds are in his hand, and he's very fit. Didn't have major shoulder surgery, while he pitched for a long, long time. And I watch that and think, all right, then he's probably has something that everyone else should be doing.
Absolutely. And I wanted to kind of interject this before you talked about your shoulder and you went back to operating. I had an ACL done 3 years ago. And I was back in the operating room, sitting down surgery about a week later. And my point there is that the rehab is so important. It's critical. And you have guys out there that get injured. And some of these superstars, Wesley Welker, for instance, had the same injury I did on the same exact day and had surgery the same week I had it. And he's back as an all-pro football player, and I can barely play 3 sets of tennis anymore.
But he's not an all-pro surgeon.
The difference is some of these athletes, they have their entourage, and he's in the gym 6 hours a day, 7 days a week for the 6 months that he's rehabbing it. Now, the weekend warrior doesn't have that at their disposal, right, but they can still be proactive, and they can still get in the gym every day and do 2 or 3 hours if they really want. They can find the time, wake up early, do something at night. They can do elastic bands. They don't have to have fancy weights. They can do good warm-ups, good stretching. So we can, we don't have 6 hours a day, 7 days a week. We're not being paid to rehab, but there can be time found in the day to do it, and that's so important, so important.
All right. Well, we could go for a long time here, and Dr. Rosenfield, really interesting, and thank you for making it easy to understand for some of us out there. John, another one in the book. So I think we learned a lot about the shoulders, and I think we got understanding of the professional athlete level. I think a lot of great questions about prevention and how it can happen to kids, because as a father, you're a father as well, and you want to make sure that your kids and you have the best chance to compete in sports and in life, and the more prevention that we know about now, the better for the future. I know I'm now going to warm up 5 minutes before I do anything. I think I'm going to warm up before I do a radio show.
That'd be a good idea. You don't want to get hurt. Your tongue or your mouth, whatever it is. So, no, I thought it was great today. I mean, that's always a question. You'll see as Drew gets older. How old's Drew now?
2.5.
It's 2.5. As Drew gets older, you're going to want to do these things to try to keep him stronger. He's getting into golf, obviously, and baseball. And those are things that there's no answer for. And these are questions that, we have the luxury of talking to Dr. Rosenfield today, but I'll tell you what, I never know those answers, and it's great that we have someone like him to sit and talk to.
Yeah, for more on Dr. Rosenfield, please check him out at the Orthopedic Center of Palm Beach County. You can learn a lot more about everything that he offers and all of their services there. John, of course, South Florida Foot and Ankle Centers, WCFoot.com. We don't usually get into your discipline, but it should be noted, 20 plus years, 4 locations throughout Palm Beach County, and not only are you interested in foot, ankle, podiatry, obviously everyone's overall wellness makes for a healthier lifestyle and a better life. So we appreciate everything that you're doing with that.
No, it's great. It's great to be here. I think this is a great series that we're having here, and bring the top doctors in Palm Beach County here to educate us. I think it's just a great thing.
We look forward to talking to you on the next episode. For Dr. Cutler, Steve Politziner, you've been listening to the Injury Report on ESPN 760.